10 and 15 mayors and county executives and all the governors. And in fact, starting this morning, we are getting direct assessments from the storm of FEMA from Director Criswell as well. Also, Florida Governor DeSantis, whom I had a chance to speak. And the Vice President and I have just convened a meeting this morning with the leaders of the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, including NORTHCOM Commander, who has responsibility for providing defense support to civilian authorities. And that apparently is going very well as from the Coast Guard and from FEMA we've received reports. We focused on what the American military can do like no one else can, provide emergency support for communities in need, and we're required by the governor in the required by the governor in the affected states. And I've spoken to all the governors, not today all of them, but I've spoken to all of them thus far, and how we can be ready to go in an instant when the call comes. At my direction, the Defense Secretary Austin has provided a range of capabilities both to Florida for Hurricane Milton, as well as the states impacted by Hurricane Helene. And the more capabilities are available, we assess the pressing needs, we can get whatever they need. To the servicemen and women who are on the ground responding to these disasters, thank you. Thank you for your professionalism, your dedication to every mission you're given, and you're repeating it again. This is a whole of government effort. It also includes the Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is providing mortgage relief for impacted homeowners. As directed, FEMA is going to open disaster recovery centers all across the impacted communities right away. So there's one stop the residents can go to learn about the support they might need, and they'll be advertised where those places are. 3 million people are without power, but more than 40 million power line workers have come from around the country, from Canada to Florida, to restore power across the state. In addition, the Federal Aviation has authorized Florida Power and Light to fly large drones before other manned aircraft can get up in the sky to quickly assess the damage on the ground so ground crews can restore power as quickly as possible. The Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers are assessing how fast they can reopen the port of Tampa to get fuel, food, water, and other basic goods flowing into the area again and quickly. Additionally, Vice President Harris and I said yesterday, and we'll say it again, to anyone who seeks to take advantage of our fellow Americans' desperation, whether you're a company engaging in price gouging or a citizen trying to scam your neighbors, we will go after you and we will hold you accountable. Now, not only that, our fellow Americans are putting their lives on the line to do this dangerous work and receive death penalties. Some received death penalties yesterday as a result of reckless, irresponsible, relentless disinformation and outright lies that continue to flow. Those who engage in such lies are undermining confidence in the rescue and recovery work that's opening and ongoing. As I speak, they're continuing. These lies are also harmful to those who most need help. Lives are on the line. People are in desperate situations. Have the decency to tell them the truth. So let me say this. To all the people impacted by Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton, despite the misinformation and lies, the truth is we're providing the resources needed to rescue, recover, and rebuild. And rebuild. Let me close with this. I know recovery and rebuilding projects can take a long and difficult time, but as long after the press and the cameras move on, I promise you, you have to pick up the pieces still. I want you to know we'll do everything in our power to help you put pieces back together and get all that you need. But God bless you, and may God bless our troops and our first responders who are in some cases risking their lives to help. Thank you very much. I'll be reporting again tomorrow. Thank you.
Mr. President, on FEMA funding, how much time does Congress have to act before FEMA or the SBA run out of money?
That's in discussion now, but I don't want to mislead you. I think in terms of the SBA, it's pretty right at the edge right now. And I think the Congress should be coming back and moving on the emergency needs immediately. And they're going to have to come back after the election as well, because this is going to be a long haul for total rebuilding. It's going to take several $1 billion. It's not going to be a matter of just a little bit. But we're providing now to make sure people have the emergency relief they need. The dollars just to be able to get a prescription filled, to get a baby formula done. All the things, that $750 that you're talking about, Mr. Trump and all those other people know it's a lie to suggest that's all they're going to get. That's bizarre. It's bizarre. They got to stop this. They're being so damn un-American with the way they're talking about this stuff. But there's going to be a need for significant amounts of money. We're already underway at trying to calculate what the cost will be because we don't want to mislead anybody. We want to make sure all the costs are able to be covered.
Have you spoken to Speaker Johnson about coming back before the election to vote?
No, I haven't.
Mr. President, so are you calling on Congress to come back early?
I think Congress should move as rapidly as they can, particularly on the most immediate need, which is small business.
But are you
The Vice President said yesterday that FEMA has what it needs. There's enough resources. The Congress does not need to come back right away.
FEMA has its needs. That's different than SBA.
Okay, so it's SBA. They need to come back and do SBA.
Yeah, but they're going to need a lot more.
Mr. President, what did Prime Minister Netanyahu tell you about his plans relating to retaliation?
He's coming over to help with the storm.
Mr. President, have you spoken with former President Trump at all?
Are you kidding me?
Information?
Mr. President Trump, former President Trump, get a life, man. Help these people.
will you hold him accountable? You said you were going to hold those accountable.
Public will hold them accountable. You better than the press hold them accountable because you know the truth.
Will you plan to speak with former President Trump?
No.
Well, we were watching President Biden speak there. Very interesting, the questions at the end. Let's start with that. Reporters asking him about some of this misinformation that has been percolating. He had addressed it in his remarks before. He was saying that he was calling out people who were perpetuating misinformation for political gain. He called them lies. He said that needs to stop because lives are on the line. And the president also said, have the decency to tell them the truth. And then later in the questioning, you heard him actually talking about former President Trump by name. And when asked if he's speaking with him, he actually said his message was, get a life, man, help these people. Clearly, some very real disagreement between the former administration and the current administration. Another big important issue there about the funding of the SBA and FEMA with all of these disasters and how much money exists for the federal government to continue to provide rebuilding and recovery efforts for all of that. FEMA, at this point, the president says, continues to have enough funding. But he said he stopped short of actually calling on Congress to come back immediately, though he did say that they should come back as soon as possible, moving quickly to try and deal with the budget shortfalls for the SBA. I want to bring in now CBS News national correspondent Tom Hansen. He's in Daytona Beach, Florida. So Daytona Beach is going to be one of those places that's going to be looking for some federal assistance. Tom, tell me more about the damage that happened there.
Hey there, Lana. Well, you're absolutely right. The damage is widespread and noticeable around the city. And I want to point out one thing that may not be the most dramatic imagery, but it is a huge problem along these coastal communities. You can see right here, there is cracking in the ground here. And that was not here yesterday. That means this wall at this hotel, this glass wall, is going to inevitably fall into the ocean because of the constant lashing of waves. And there is no beachfront, essentially, to protect structures like this from powerful storms like what we just saw. So we are watching this very closely. We're not going to get any closer than really where we're standing because inevitably this is going to fall into the ocean. This is what happened during Hurricane Ian, according to the manager of this hotel 2 years ago. And they said the exact same thing happened 2 years ago. So they're anticipating that in the hours, days ahead, this wall will be lost to the sea, and that has to do with the corrosion and then mixed with these powerful storms fueled by climate change. That is a huge concern along these coastal communities where there is minimal beach to protect the communities from the ocean. So that is one concern right there. The other thing that we are watching, and at last check, I just checked this right before we came on, there are still more than 200,000 people in Daytona Beach who are without power. So those down power lines, people are working to restore them. At our hotel, there were even linemen filing in and ready to go this morning before we went and ventured into other parts of Daytona Beach. They were ready to go to restore power, but still that is slow going for now because there are these pockets of flooding that are preventing them from getting to so many communities that need the lights to come back on. Lana.
Tom, I think it's such a good point that in addition to some of the destruction that we see, that there is also critical infrastructure failures that are being assessed, cracks that might belie some more serious problems, and all of that is going to be part of what officials need to deal with. And the president said that there's 3 million people without power right now. I spoke with my father in Fort Myers. He said the power's back on for him after 6 hours of it being out. But I'm wondering what officials are telling you in terms of their biggest concerns for efforts to try and get things put back together, as well as those rescue and recovery efforts.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's go region by region then, because the concerns vary depending on where we are. So on the West Coast, the side that really bore the brunt of this storm, that Category 3 that just smashed into those communities, obviously the concern on that side is much more focused on recovery and rescue efforts, because those are communities that essentially in certain parts were completely covered in sand, completely covered in storm surge, and people are really in dire need of rescuing on the western coast. On the eastern coast, there are those concerns as well. However, we received a Category 1 storm as opposed to a Category 3. So the impacts of that, those 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, did not create as many dangerous cataclysmic events as compared to what we saw on the western side, the Gulf side. And so the focus here is to restore power. It's to wait for waters to recede. So many homes, as we have seen earlier in the day, were inundated with flood water. And as you know, Lana, flooding is expensive and it takes a long time to rebuild when residential homes are affected to the degree that we saw, I should say, earlier today. Lana.
Tom Hansen, appreciate all that reporting. Thank you. Well, new economic reports show inflation is slowing, but jobless claims are up. We're going to break down what's behind these changes and the impact on the economy. And efforts to help hurricane victims are getting a big boost from Miss America herself. We're going to tell you about Taylor Swift's grand gesture. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.